So there is so many classical nuances, but still it's about Shyam. You're listening only to the way she says Shyam in different ways. So now let's listen to Rag Malkons. Classical music, especially with Hindustani music, where we start with alap, where there are no words, then you go into the mukra, and there is really, the words really doesn't matter what the words are. It's really the melody that exists. That's what you're focused on. And so it's like when you move from light music to classical music, where in light music it's very externally focused. In classical music it's more internally focused. So you move inwards because you become one with sur or one with melody. So that's the whole idea of classical music. So typically in classical music, and especially in Hindustani, in Shyamrao Gharana, we emphasize the slow tempo singing, because that is when you have the opportunity to actually become one with sound. So let's go in deeper into classical music and talk about what are the elements of classical music. So there are three important elements. One is the tonal note sa. So the sa is the most important note, establishing the sa correctly and completely, because from which all other notes are born. So they're all Rishabh or Kandar or Madhyam, Pancham, everything is born from the Shaj or the sa. Because it is in relationship with the Shaj that all other notes come into being. So sa is an extremely important note. So in Hindustani music, that's why we always return to the sa. We establish the sa multiple times. The other concept that's important is rag. Hindustani music again is based on rag. And we'll talk about what are the elements of rag in just a moment. Then the third element is tal. And it is in the bandish that the tal and the rag come together. So we will discuss all these things in greater detail. So before we get into vocal music, let's talk about classical music can be played whether it's an instrument or sung by a voice. So what's different between instrumental music and vocal music? And as we said, Shyamrao Gharana is really based on vocal values. It's a vocal-based music. So let's talk about what are the different instruments. How are they different? So for example, every instrument or every body or any of us, there is this body, there's a framework. You have to work with this framework. So just like that, every instrument has a framework. You have to work within the framework of the instrument. So what is applicable for the harmonium is not applicable for the sitar. What's applicable for the sitar is not applicable for the sarangi. So you have to work with what works for the instrument, and you have to try to bring that out, to bring the beauty of that instrument out. So let's look at the harmonium first. The harmonium is a wind instrument. So there are notes. The notes are played as staccato notes. So they are independent notes. So there is you cannot really show the journey between the notes. That is, if you went from sa to re or sa, re to ga, whatever. You can play sa, you can play re, you can play ga, but you cannot show how you go from sa to re, because there are a whole number of shrutis that exist between sa to re and re to ga. You can't show that with the harmonium. So let's look at Rag Gavati again, which you heard in the beginning. So here again, he played the same notes, but you don't count as sagama pada panisa sada nipa dama paga maresa. He played that, but you can hear them as individual notes. You can't really see the journey that exists between the notes. So let's look at a sitar piece. A sitar being a string instrument, I can actually look at the journeys that exist between the notes. But you can't really... I have to turn this off. So you can hear the means, but if you listen to the sound and you pluck it, the length of that note is very short. So you have to pluck multiple times. So the breadth of the instrument is short. The harmonium, you can hold it for a long time, and you can play a certain note for a long time. Whereas in a sitar, you can play the means, you can play the gaseets, but you cannot hold the note for a long time. So let's look at Sarangi. Sarangi, which is closest to the human voice. And here, the thing with the Sarangi is that because it's a bowed instrument, so you can hold the note for a long time. You can play the means, you can play the gusseets, which shows the journey between the notes. However, the string is not an open string. So for example, in the tanpura sound is open. So you cannot clearly hear the upper harmonics. That's the way the instrument is designed. You play the note, you hear the note, but the resonance doesn't give you the upper harmonics in a sarangi. But still, it is the closest to the human voice. Whereas if you look at the tanpura is an interesting instrument. There was a huge revolution that happened in classical music when they started singing with the tanpura. The tanpura is an instrument which has, the strings are open. So it has 4 strings. I hope it is still in tune. Because of the AC, I hope it didn't. So it has 4 strings. The first string is the pancham, pa, lower pancham, mandra pancham. There are 2 strings that have the shaj, and the third string, that's the karj shaj. So the thing is, because it has this thing called the zavari, there's this thread. So when you listen to it, you hear the resonance, you can hear the upper partials. And as you go, as the notes are lower, especially in the mandra saptak, you can hear the upper partials very clearly. So, for example, when we tune the tanpura, we listen to the upper partial, which is the gandhar. So when the ga, ga, so you listen to the ga, that's when you know, okay, it's not perfectly matched here in this case. So you can hear the beats of the gandhar from the tat tanpura and this. So when you know, that's how you tune the tanpura, by listening to the upper partial. And that's because the strings vibrate openly through the zavari. So the human voice is similar to the tanpura. As you go lower and lower, you can hear it, the voice gets broader, and you can hear the upper partials. So let's now talk about, this is why the tanpura is the right accompaniment for the human voice, because it works like the human voice. So let's sing Rag Gavati again. We didn't have a tanpura in C, so I had to bring my tanpura, which is in a higher pitch. an instrument, an important difference to remember is that you have to find your tonal sa first. Whereas in an instrument, whether it's a harmonium or a sitar or a sarangi, the notes are already there. So you have, whereas with a human voice, you have to listen to the tanpura, you have to find the sa in your voice. So that's why it's really important that you have to establish sa multiple times while singing. Then another important thing about vocal music is that because you can hold notes for a long time, you have to have really good breath control. So there is a lot of voice exercises and breath control exercises that are done to improve that stability on a certain note. So working on breath control is essential for vocal music. This is just a corollary. So let's now talk about what are those essential vocal values. What are those things that are sung in vocal music? There are three important concepts in vocal music. One is therao. Therao is stability at a certain pitch point. So holding a certain note for a long period of time. Like when you start as sa,